in that bush, it has thorns on it, and the child keeps going over there, and the grandmother will sit, you know, and watch the child perhaps go and touch a thorn so that the lesson will be learned. Now, some of us newborn parents might freak out about that. Oh, you let the baby touch the thorn bush. But in the old school way of parenting, they may let you experience some pain so that you can understand. So multiplied by infinity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow the evildoer to do things. And in his infinite wisdom, knowing that the outcome is not in their favor, but he won't take them to task immediately. And some of the scholars say this is one of the subtleties of the meaning of Rahman. Yeah. All of Allah's creatures receive mercy. And if they only knew, they would surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they only knew that they were receiving this mercy. Most of the time they don't know this. Right? Then Rahim is the mercy that Allah Ta'ala, on top of the mercy that He shows generally, is it or the compassion. Rahim is the compassion that Allah has for the believers, those who surrender, those who submit. There's a special mercy that's compounded. So think of Rahman as the compassion where Allah Ta'ala will allow the evildoer, like the righteous doer, to eat. Everybody eats. Everybody gets to drink. Everybody gets to breathe air. Everybody gets to enjoy beauty. Everybody gets to enjoy life. Because Allah permitted it to be that way for the righteous, for the non-righteous. But then for the believers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a special compassion. And so when we look at how Allah described the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the things that He said about Prophet Muhammad was that he was a Rahman. And He said that the Prophet was Rahim towards the believers and not Rahman. Why? Because as great as the Prophet was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't have the capacity to show this depth of love or this depth of compassion, because he got angry, because he wanted revenge. He wanted revenge right away, sometimes, you know. Whereas Rahim, if someone came before the Prophet and did something or acknowledged that they wronged him, for example, there was a person who came to the Prophet and admitted to him in front of him that he called him a cheat behind his back to some other people. And that Muhammad is not fair in how he gives out the sadaqah. I went to get sadaqah, he gave me the sadaqah, and he gave Fulan more than he gave me. But he didn't say this in front of the Prophet. And then he came to the Prophet, and in one narration of the hadith, the Prophet looked at him, and the man felt a guilt and said, "Oh, Ya Rasulullah, I said that you weren't fair, and I really didn't mean it." And the Prophet said, "Well, will me giving you more charity make you happy? Happier with me?" And the man said, No. Astaghfirullah, no. But the Prophet gave him more charity anyway. So this captures what the mercy of the Prophet was like. But it couldn't compare, or the compassion would never compare, because the Prophet is a human being, and Allah Ta'ala is the Lord of Muhammad and all the creatures. And so, just to set up an understanding of this, why this virtue or why this attribute is so important, and how it is connected to an important understanding of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah Ta'ala is so merciful to us. And so a part of why we reflect on the mercy is because the mercy humbles us. When we reflect on the mercy and how Allah is so merciful to us, and how we are in a constant state of receiving this mercy, and how Allah is so compassionate to us, how Allah allows us to take journeys, all of us, during which we make our share of mistakes, we hurt our share of people, we violate, we do all kinds of things, and yet Allah Ta'ala's door still is open to receive us back to Him. And He shows us this mercy from the very beginning. So I'm going to start by talking about receiving mercy, because there's a very interesting reflection here that I mentioned, the correlation between the word for mercy, which is rahmah, and the word for the womb of the mother, which is rahim. And this is a good place to reflect, because the womb of the mother and that experience, although it's a mystery, the reality of it is really a mystery. I know the doctors have what we call the ultrasound, they have all these delicate instruments, and they're able to capture now, take pictures of the development of the fetus inside the mother's womb. But this is only an observation or an examination of the physical experience of the fetus in the mother's womb. It doesn't capture the spiritual significance of the fetus inside the mother's womb. And it is in the mother's womb that the manifestation of Allah's mercy on us in our fetal stage began. So scientifically, the mother's womb is where the child is sheltered, protected, nourished, loved, physically receives everything it needs to develop physically. But also in the mother's womb, this is the space where the spiritual nourishment occurs. So the experience of, the first experience of this rahmah, this mercy, occurs in the mother's womb. And the spiritual evidence of this is that the bond that develops between the child and its mother is a bond that is, the descriptors for it are words like miraculous, amazing, right? So, for instance, there is no person on the planet who's more merciful to a person than a mother is to her child. We know this from science, we know this from social science, we know this from human observation. And most of us can attest to the truth of this. That generally speaking, there's nothing, very few things that are like the relationship that a mother and the nature of the mother's caring, the nature of a mother's loving, the nature of a mother's giving, the nature of a mother's sacrificing, all of the bond from the fetus stage to delivery, to birth, right? To caring for the child, the nature of the love and the protection, there's nothing like it. And the only similitude that we find in the spiritual tradition for how Allah loves us is how a mother loves her child. And so you find in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, who is the person that is most worthy of my best companionship? Right? And we all know this hadith. Some of us, like me, my mama loved this hadith. Right? Because when I would be, not behaving, my mother would remind me. The Prophet said, I'm most deserving of your best companionship. And the hadith has variations. But all of them capture something very interesting. Because when he was asked this question, he was asked by a man, and he told the man to honor your mother how many times? He said it to him 3 times. Because the man asked him 3 times. He said, who is most deserving? Your mother. Then who? Your mother. Then who? Your mother. Then who? And on the 4th instance, he said, your father. Now, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Why did the Prophet say 3 times the mother, 1 time the father? And it's not because dads are deadly losers, right? Not because dad doesn't deserve any respect. No, it's none of that. It's to perhaps highlight for us the mercy aspect of mothering, which is nothing natural. I certainly can't explain, I can explain observation. I can't explain the feeling, the bond. Only a mother can do that. But reflecting on what we observe that our mothers show us what unconditional love looks like. Many times. Most of the time they show us what unconditional love looks like. What unconditional sacrifice looks like. Mothers will do almost anything for their children. Some mothers will die for their children. Some mothers, if given the choice between their life and their child's life, and everyone values their life, the mother will choose their life. The mother will choose the child's life. And this is all not happenstance. This is all not a mistake. This is by design. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen women and mothers to be the vessels through which He allows creation to come into existence. So, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your Lord has ordained وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. So He says that He is preordained that you worship none other than Him. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. And then you show kindness to your parents. And in another verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to the fact that the toiling and the hardship of birth, حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ كُرْهًا وَوَضَعَتْهُ كُرْهًا. That while the mother is carrying the child, she is enduring a tremendous hardship. Externally her body changes. Internally her body changes. Bones moving around, limbs, stuff shifting, organs up and down and to the left and to the right, sharp pains, shortness of breath, right? Really, 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 really strange craving. Right? So like I was reading a story of a woman who ate paper while she was pregnant. She would not normally eat paper. But while she was pregnant, she had a craving to eat paper. And nothing would satisfy that craving but paper. So then we'd be at the Ramadan iftar, right? And Sister Ayana, really, it's not you. But we will understand. So I have the chicken, you have the fish. Sister Ayana has paper. Right? Because that's the experience of pregnancy. And Allah captures that. He says, حَمَلَتْهُ أُمُّهُ كُرْهًا وَوَضَعَتْهُ كُرْهًا. And then when she delivers, when she gives birth, that in itself is a hardship, a tremendous pain on the mother, right? And on the child, right? And then Allah brings forth this life. And through all of that, Allah's mercy is manifesting in that entire journey in the spiritual sense. Because everything that the child needed while the child was in the mother's womb, Allah provided for the child through the fluid that's in the mother's stomach. All the vitamins, you know, when you come out into the world and then the doctors say you need vitamin B, B12, D, C, E, K, A, you know, all this list of stuff that you need. By the miracle of Allah's design, all of the stuff that you need to sustain life physically, physiologically, is in your mother's womb. And how that's a tremendous mercy. It's already there before we figured out a name for it out in the world. So when we come out into the world, also everything that you need is in the world, taken care of. So reflecting on this miracle of mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the beginning of our journey calls us to reflect also on a couple of questions, because it's important to understand how Allah, the design of the creation is intricate. And so this talk about our mothers calls us to recognize what our duty is. Because what way do we have to repay our mothers? This is just a part of what our mothers go through. So how do we repay that? How do we repay someone who took care of us when we couldn't take care of ourselves? And oftentimes the first thing that we forget when we're able to take care of ourselves is that there was a time when we couldn't take care of ourselves. That's one of the first things that we forget. So how do we repay that? How do we give to a person, give back to a person who oftentimes gave us everything? Food off their plate, clothes off their back, their last, everything. Right? And these are all spiritual questions. And so we struggle, honestly, when it comes to honoring our mothers, because, you know, it's meant to be a struggle. So I'm going to take you back to the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, paradise lies at the feet of mothers. And if you understand, the journey to Jannah is not an easy one. You will understand that you will see that there is difficulty in honoring or struggling with the duty to honor our mothers. It's not easy, especially when we grow up and we become independent and we become our own people. Oftentimes we forget that the reason that we were able to get to where we are, there's a sabab, there's a connection. And it's our parents, it's our mothers, right? But we must engage in this struggle nonetheless, because this struggle is where we are able to, part of how we can return the blessing or to repay our mothers is to show them kindness, compassion, and forbearance. So we show them mercy, or part of the mercy that they showed us when we were in the womb. Right? So this is just on the mercy that we receive. So we receive this mercy. And this should humble us, because Allah Ta'ala took care of us through our mothers. Took care of us through our mothers. Now, on giving mercy, right? So that last line about our mothers was to set us up for an understanding of how to give mercy. So first of all, we start with the person closest to us. We start, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again says in the Quran, وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That Allah ordained that we worship none other than Him and that we are kind to our parents. So kindness to our parents, goodness to our parents, being good to our parents. These are all like the dangling fruits. This is the easy stuff. Oftentimes, people make being a good person or being religious really difficult. They think they have to pay millions of dollars and, pray 10 million raka'ah and just be this soldier of God that just, and they often forget the simple things, like being good to your parents. And in that is a test, because it's not easy sometimes to be good to your parents. Because one of the things that happens when you grow up is that when you become your parents' peer, you look at them as a human being. And when we look at each other as peers, you look at me, I look at you, you look at my good things and my not so good things, and likewise I do the same to you. We do that with our parents. But sometimes we forget that our parents are human beings. So the motherhood is a station, but the station is occupied by a human being. And so what has to happen is that the relationship has to evolve, has to change. But the aspect of the relationship that has to be maintained throughout, one of the things is this manifestation of mercy. This is one of the best ways, Allah Ta'ala will be pleased with us, inshallah. We figure out how to do this. And it's not easy, right? But if we can figure it out, it's the close fruit. Now, also on giving mercy, we're challenged by it sometimes because, particularly in Western culture, mercy is viewed as an attribute of weakness. Because a part of mercy is weakness or softness, right? And so, in Western culture, we don't like weakness. We like strength. We like our leaders to be strong. We like this one to be strong, that one to be strong. But it's a mistake to look at this attribute as an attribute of weakness. Because when we do this, we are forgetting that Allah Ta'ala refers to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran as a mercy. He called the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam a mercy. And he would never describe the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as something weak. The Prophet was not weak, right? And Allah referred to the Prophet as a man merciful because he was the most merciful and most compassionate human being who ever walked earth. And his example speaks for itself. In the Quran, Allah also says, وَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. He said about the Prophet, to the Prophet, about him, and it is by the mercy of Allah, on you, Muhammad, that you were gentle with the believers, that you were kind to the believers. So Allah let the Prophet know that Allah's mercy supersedes his mercy. And he is the one who made Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam this merciful, compassionate human being. And that was a mercy for the believers. Because why? Was it a mercy for the believers? Because the believers would come with stuff, human stuff. The Prophet would say, do this. And some of the believers would do that. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, stand up. Some of the believers would sit down. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, don't do that. And some of the believers would say, why? Like normally I like listening to you, Prophet. Why I gotta listen to you today? Right? And this is all the thing, these are all the things that human beings do. And so the Prophet being a kind person, a compassionate person, and not a hard-hearted person. And Allah says this, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. The fact that you were fadl, so quick with an acid tongue, sharp. You know, someone makes a mistake, he's stupid. Didn't I tell you not to do that? You're stupid. غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ, or hard-hearted. No compassion. So there was no room for error. How would the companions approach the Prophet if they felt that there was no room for error? Shaking, right? If they felt that every mistake that they made, he was going to, then can we imagine they wouldn't cultivate love, they would cultivate fear, they would be afraid, they would respect him, but they wouldn't love him. If their every word, their every move, you know, now I have to face the Prophet. And this was the difference between Umar and Muhammad. People were afraid of Umar, the companion, from his days of Jahiliyyah. And Umar knew this. This is why when the Prophet ﷺ made hijrah, right, from Mecca to Medina, he did it secretly. And he had a bodyguard, right? You know the story from the Surah. The Prophet left in the middle of the night, secretly, and he had a bodyguard. How did Umar do it? Does anyone know how Umar did that? Anyone? Anybody? What did Umar say? Umar said, listen, tomorrow, 3:00 p.m. sharp, I am leaving Mecca, retired people, I'm gone. Because I'm a Muslim now. So I'm going with my leader Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to Medina. And if any of y'all think you can stop me, try. If you want your mama to lose you, your kids to be orphans, your wife to be a widow, try. That's what he said. And guess what? No history book said that anybody tried. Because they feared him. But they revered the Prophet. Even Umar revered the Prophet. Why? Because love trumps that hard stuff. Now sometimes there's a need for that. But what trumps all of that is the love. And the Prophet ﷺ had overwhelming love. That's why his companions loved him. They weren't afraid to come to him. They weren't afraid to make a mistake. They weren't afraid to be wrong. How many of you know even the people who made a mistake documented is wrong by the book, by the letter? They went and confessed to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, I understand that there's a penalty for this violation. Punish me, Ya Rasulullah, punish me. Punish me. If you can imagine the Prophet saying, like, oh, wait, go come get him. No, stop. Stop talking. Shh. Stop saying that. Stop. Just let it go. No, I didn't hear you. I don't, really. This is all a manifestation of his compassion. He had compassion for people. You know why he had compassion for people? Because he understood that life can be very challenging and difficult and hard, and people will fail over and over again. No matter how much they try, they will fail, all of us, because none of us is perfect. The Prophet was Ma'soom. So Allah protected him from all the things that he needed to be protected from. But everybody else was a human being. So Allah said to the Prophet, if you were acid tongue, hard-hearted, what would have happened? Allah said they would have dispersed. Like they would have hung around for a bit because the Prophet also was a charismatic person. But had he been not kind to people, they wouldn't have stuck around. They wouldn't have stuck around in the role of prophecy. They wouldn't have stuck around. Because Allah would have been, too hard, too much, all the time. Whereas the Prophet ﷺ had the balance. Right? So, and now for brothers, this is for us, because this is the example of what it means to be man. Now, some of y'all are really young and coming up, and I don't know if you've heard this, but when I was coming up, we were sort of taught, don't be soft. You can't be soft. Don't show mercy. Don't show no mercy. And that was attributed, it was like, that's why I said the attribute is an attribute of weakness, because, or people perceive it as an attribute of weakness, because many people who made me well told me in my life, don't have mercy. Don't have no mercy. It's not a good thing for a man to have any aspect of his character that will be construed as soft. Right? But we're not going to be better than Muhammad. And so the Prophet ﷺ embodied this attribute because it was an attribute of strength. It's an attribute of strength. You know why it's an attribute of strength? It's an attribute of strength because it means that the person is aware of those who are around them and sensitive to their needs. And brothers, if we're going to be fathers, our daughters and our sons, we have to be sensitive and aware. If we're going to be husbands, we have to be aware and sensitive. We have to be. We have to be. Okay? Because that is the part of us that will allow us to fulfill our role completely. And so it's an attribute of strength. And so if we focus on it, we will inshallah evolve to a fuller human being, a balanced human being. Because we'll be balanced. We'll have the strength that we all covet as men, but we will have the balance that will soften us, that will keep us right by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the idea of hypermasculinity, that's a full word. We should move away from that because it's problematic, right? And move towards the center. Hypermasculinity simply means that we are so strong and our strength is only manifested when we're cold, when we're unfeeling, when we're merciless, and when we're hard. Right? Then you're a man. That's when you're strong. Right? But the reality of the experience of manhood is that everybody cries. I remember I was told not to cry. The first time I cried on the playground, an older guy came up, picked me up, smacked me on the back of my head, stop crying, don't cry. Right? Now, the basketball court or the football, that's a battlefield, right? It has its rules. But generally speaking, as a general life rule, it's okay to cry. It's okay to have feelings, right? Because you're a human being, right? And so we must look for the balance, and the balance of how these feelings are expressed existed in the character of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so during these first 10 days of fasting, this being day 2, I think, right? Do we have unanimous Any dissenters? This is day 2, right? I know y'all Muslims, boy. No, Shaykh, actually they sighted the moon. So, right? But I think we have a consensus in the room that this is day 2. Alhamdulillah. So on this second day, the first 10 days of Ramadan, the question that I want to leave you with is, how can we practice this attribute of mercy? Because when we take you back to the hadith, it was the Prophet that says that Allah gives mercy to those who show mercy. Right? So during the month of Ramadan, we come in with our stuff. Right? Those of us that are old enough to have stuff, and we want Allah to have mercy on us. So if we want Allah to have mercy on us, we must not give Allah what Allah needs from us, but understand that the equation, the way it works, is that whenever we give mercy, we receive mercy. Right? Now we already receive mercy because Allah, as I mentioned in the beginning, is Ar-Rahman. But we want the special mercy. We want the mercy that emanates from the attribute Rahim. How do we do that? How do we get that? Right? Of course, we pray and ask Allah to have mercy on us and give us mercy. But then there are some things that we can try to do as both men and women. Right? And the first thing is that realize that this attribute is not an attribute of weakness. It's not an attribute of weakness. It's not an attribute of weakness. It's an attribute of strength. It's a spiritual attribute that will enhance you spiritually. If you can wrap your mind, and more importantly, wrap your heart around the essence of what it is and how deeply connected it is to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It gives you access because Allah is Ar-Rahim. So when you act in any way, in a merciful way, you are enacting one aspect of this attribute. And so we need to keep that in mind, okay? And, as an example of that, and how the Prophet ﷺ corrected people. So I directed a comment a little while ago to the brothers because there was a similar incident in which the Prophet ﷺ was in the masjid, right? And there were men in the masjid, women in the masjid, and then children in the masjid. So the children, as they would come in the masjid, they would run up to the front of the masjid and jump on the Prophet. And so he would embrace them. He would hug them and kiss them and play with them, right? And so one of the new companions was standing next to him, and he said, when he saw the Prophet kiss a boy, he said, "What is this? Well, where is that? We don't like." He said because he was a Bedouin from the desert, and they were the personification of. You want to talk about hard people? I mean, yeah, I'm talking about people hard physically, right? Because even it shows in their skin. They're in the sun so long, they have like hard skin, right? They're just hard people, right? So a Bedouin was standing next to the Prophet, and he saw the Prophet kiss a boy. He said, boys, no, we don't do that. And he said, I'll kiss your boys. I might have to revisit this being a Muslim thing. Because y'all kiss your boys. That's going to make your boy soft. And the Prophet said, you know what he said to him? He said, I can't help it if Allah has not put mercy in your heart. I can't help you with that. You got to take that one to God. You got to go to Allah with that. Right? And that was to say that being a man is not about the bravado all the time. Right? Oftentimes, and you younger brothers, you can take this from me, you can take it to the bank. Oftentimes the bravado is hot air. Most of the time, because very few people can talk, very few people can back up their talk. When we, like you have a lot of talkers. You guys play sports. There's a guy that talks the game. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then the game is played, and the game tells you who does what, right? Yeah. So carry that into life. It's one thing to talk manhood, and it's another thing to be a man. Part of talking manhood is bravado, being, right all the time. It's the strongest, and the smartest, and then I told you we would do that. No. I told her that one day she's gonna be up here with me. Now she said it's not today. Not today. Okay? So understanding that this is a virtue, an attribute of strength, and reflecting on this. And if in fact you want Allah to have mercy on us, we must think of ways that we can have mercy on people. And I can say, having been an imam for many years, life is not easy for people. And oftentimes when people come before us, they have problems just like we have problems. They have things that they struggle with, just like we have things that we struggle with. They forget stuff, just like we forget stuff. They're bad at some things, just like we're bad at some things. And when you understand this puts in your heart this sense that there has to be a compassion when you're dealing with people. A kindness that people feel from you, because they'll want to come back, like the people wanted to come back to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is important to remember, right? There's a saying, people will remember how you treated them more than they will remember what you said to them, something like that.
How do you make them feel?
See?
How do you make them feel?
People remember how you make them feel more than what you say to them. And I try to remember this in the khutbah, when I give the khutbah, to have a balance in the message, because people remember how you make them feel. They always do, right? And so a part of that should be informed by a sense of compassion, kindness, and forbearance. Now, the forbearance is really connected to the second part of Ramadan, so that's a different lecture. But once we have this sense that we want to be more merciful, I think we will start to experience a feeling of Allah having more mercy on us, and us realizing it. Because sometimes Allah is showering us with mercy and we don't realize it until it's too late. Until it's too late. Because we're missing the signs. But when we start to be aware of the mercies that descend on us from Allah all the time, it really balances us in a good way. And this is what we pray for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during these first 10 days of Ramadan. And in closing, two things. I want to leave you with an encouragement from Imam Haddad, in which he says in the Book of Assistance, increase your good deeds, especially in Ramadan, for the reward of a supererogatory act performed during it equals that of an obligatory act performed at any other time. Ramadan is also a time when good works are rendered easy, and one has much more energy for them than another of the month. This is because the soul, lazy when it comes to good works, is then imprisoned by hunger and thirst. The devils who hinder it are shackled, the gates of the fire are shut, the gates of the garden are open, and the herald calls every night at God's command, O you who wish for goodness, hasten, and O you who wish for evil, halt. And this is by Imam Haddad. And then, last but not least, to close out with a dua. And Ask Allah, may we become more merciful and empathetic in our dealings and interactions. May we learn to cultivate the belief that in order for us to receive Allah's mercy, we must strive to become more compassionate, merciful people ourselves. May we learn to engage others from a more compassionate, kind, and understanding and caring place. And that Allah Ta'ala bless us with the gift of mercy in this 10 days of Ramadan. Amen. Do we have any questions? Yes.
In saying that the mother has this righteous position, I've heard in some countries where if the mother is angry with you, the law is angry with you. If
Right.
the mother has so much control that the mother can tell you who cannot marry.
Right.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. That's an excellent point of clarity because we need to be clear, especially mothers. We need to be clear that the statement of the Prophet, first of all, the verse in the Quran, and then the statement of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as it relates to the reverence, is due to the fact that mothers occupy a station. But that station does not equate to mothers being perfect, because mothers are human beings. And so what that means is that mothers will have good characteristics and bad characteristics. Good akhlaq, good manners, and bad manners. Just like everybody else, just like sometimes their own children. But, and so for that reason, the humanity of the mother is the part where mothers have to care. So the mother has to understand that just because the Prophet said this about the station of motherhood, it doesn't mean that the mother can act as a tyrant, that the mother can act as a despot, that the mother can be unjust, or any of those things. And so this is, actually, I've seen this manifest culturally. And then in some aspects of adopted culture, people assume what they call Muslim culture to be that, my mother doesn't like my wife, so if my mother says divorce my wife, I have to divorce my wife. And my mother, and all of this is a skewed cultural misunderstanding of the station of motherhood and the reverence that Allah is calling us to in the Quran. Because those two aren't related. Those two aren't related. And they're contradictory to the logic of raising children. Because if you raise your children, you raise them to the point in their life where they, in their development, where they become what? They become mukallaf. So that means that they're responsible. So if the mother's son or daughter marries a bad man or woman, and even if it's against the advice of the mother, then that's on them. It's not on the mother. The mother will bear no responsibility for the child's mistakes, for the child's misdeeds, or anything of that nature. And so the call to reverence the mothers is more of the duty that must be shown to them, and not the power or authority that they have over their children, especially once their children become bad and become of age. And, but this cultural thing, it's, I have friends that in America whose mothers exert that type of authority over them. And if you don't, it's a power thing. If you don't do it, you might not look. You grew up Muslim, and mom heard a hadith, or she thought she heard something in the hadith, and she already strong-handed. Woo, man, look, boy. And you're old enough to say no, then she pull out the mama card. Right? And the mama card, now, they pull on the spiritual strings, it can be a form of blackmail, right? Well, if you don't do that, you know Allah's not going to be pleased with you. You know Allah is only happy with you when I'm happy. No, but logically, that's so out there, right? But emotionally, a mother can do that. So it's very important that mothers understand, and parents in general, right? That our children, we don't own them, that they're a trust. And you have to really wrap your mind around, like, you don't own them. Right? Now, that's a whole nother lecture, right? Because it crosses over into like culturally, like how we were raised. Your mother, I didn't have a choice but to respect my mother, right? And then culturally, also, sometimes the culture will teach you or suggest that you have a choice in whether or not you respect your mother. Like the culture will teach you that. I'm grown, I can do what I want to do, right? So those lines can get blurred. Now in African American culture, it used to be that when that line got blurred, the way the fuzziness was removed was a backhand. And I go, clap! No, I can't. No, I see clearly. I remember. But in other cultures, where there's a deeper understanding of the religious tradition, sometimes people go to the other extreme. So thank you for that point of clarity. It's important to know, make that distinction. Because nobody wants to be a tyrant. No one wants to be a tyrant.
Well, I was wondering how much of the tyrant will people now that I'm trying to get that big.
You can't go into a tyrant at all. You don't even want to step on that path. But that path is full of enticements. Anyone else? Anything else? So inshallah, how's the fast for everyone so far? It hasn't kicked in yet. So y'all look at it, it's great, alhamdulillah. I'll see you next Sunday. We're here reeling, and I can't wait till Ramadan is over. I'm glad he's here.
Well, Ustad, it's been a pleasure because I always think about Ramadan in Rajab, and in the Sha'ban I'm fasting and cleansing. So I'm still waiting excitedly for the first day.
Of course.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Alhamdulillah.
And all during the year we were going to lectures and things based on spirituality, so that we could feel that when the time comes. So 6 months ago, I had my heart set on waiting to do this the best I can.
You were waiting.
Yeah.
You were waiting for the good old friend.
Yeah.
Ramadan.
Because it's like a friend coming.
Yeah.
And it's sad for me to go.
So Ramadan is like a friend.
But then Shaitan last week,
Of course.
he had me and Yaya at the road, boy.
Oh, yeah, uh-oh.
Look, brother, but that happens.
Yeah,
because
of course.
your own thing starts coming out. It's not those Shaitans or genes.
Right.
It's those things that are embedded in you that you gotta learn to control. And that's where you said something about being very in control, compassionate, and comfortable.
Right.
Because you have to always remember, you're like, I'm hungry. Do it for a while. Just be humble.
Right.
Just give in.
Right. We thank Allah that we're here to see another Ramadan. There's so many people that aren't here, that used to be here.
Yes.